All right, guys, it's time for another installment of Nintendeen today. Let's see what he has to say about Star Fox on Nintendo Switch 2.
How's it going, everybody? So the Nintendo Switch 2 is proving to be the exact console that I dreamed of many years ago. Yeah, believe it or not, that's the case. And it's all really for one simple purpose. I am a Nintendo 64 fanboy. It has been my favorite console through my entire life. Mind you, I've enjoyed many consoles, mostly Nintendo consoles, but the Nintendo 64 has a special place in my heart that nothing will ever replicate. Does it have to do with nostalgia? Yes. 100% yes. In fact, I would argue that many of the millennials out there that are overspending on everything Nintendo related right now are doing so explicitly because of that same nostalgia. Some of us were kindergartners, others were elementary school students, others might have been in middle school. But one thing was for certain, when we got to control Mario in that 3D space, oh, that just hit differently. It's why to this day I find it absolutely hilarious when people enjoy a new console generation. And don't get me wrong, it's not that there aren't huge leaps and jumps between every console generation, each one is a revolutionary in its own right somehow. But there was absolutely nothing ever, and there will never be anything like that leap we saw from the SNES to the Nintendo 64, at least from the Nintendo angle. The same idea when the game started coming out on the PlayStation 1, as well as even the Sega Saturn for those 4 people that bought it. I have spent my entire life making claims and arguments that the Nintendo 64 iteration of every single game was the best on the Nintendo 64. And I'm not the only one. Until now, people argue that Ocarina of Time was the best Zelda game, and they will defend it to the death as if that game has not even remotely aged poorly.
Okay, I had to let it play for a bit so you could kind of see where he was going with this. Kind of get the angle of this video, because Nintendeen opens with this cope that like, oh, I'm a big N64 fan. I love the N64. It's way better than the PlayStation and the Saturn. And then he just kind of segues into this like, well, actually, Ocarina of Time isn't that great, guys. Again, it's very interesting how he tries to manipulate people into thinking he's some like turbo critical fan and that he's like some reasonable person who's just had enough of Nintendo's nonsense. It's a giant cope, and it should get called out. Please keep this in mind as we continue watching this video.
It kind of has. Not a lot, don't get me wrong. Like, it's still very much playable and enjoyable, but it has aged. Let's be real for a second. In the same way that Super Mario 64, without a shadow of a doubt, is the best 3D Mario game, but yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, that game has also aged. Until now, anytime a new Smash Brothers game comes out, as much as I enjoy that Smash Brothers game, I'm like, why can't they just go back and make it the exact same way that the Smash 64 game controlled so I can destroy everybody with NES? Shoot, Mario Tennis, Mario Party. Surprisingly enough, the only one that I do not feel the same way about is Mario Kart, in that I feel like almost every sequel after that one got better, but I know that's blasphemous for a lot of people to hear, and obviously it is because nostalgia for the Nintendo 64 hits differently. You know the way that most people feel about the GameCube controller? I feel that way about the Nintendo 64 controller. And no, I do not have 3 hands. I just loved holding that controller, and I played so many games on it that in my mind, it was like, oh yeah, this was the best controller, obviously, because I had the best games in my mind. So now imagine, fast forward, 2026. The brand new Nintendo Switch 2 comes out, and in the span of a single year, Star Fox 64 and Zelda Ocarina of Time are coming to the Switch 2. If someone had told me that a year and a half ago, my brain probably would have not even registered the price of the console and the games and everything. Not because they would have not mattered to me, but because I would have been so overrun in my thoughts about all of these Nintendo 64 games getting remasters, or remakes, rebuilds, I don't know what the hell people are calling them these days. But I would have had such tunnel vision on the thoughts of playing all of these Nintendo 64 games again in 2026, but remastered, that I might have swiped a credit card without even looking at the price. At least, that's what Nintendo wants. In fact, that's what...
Yeah, did you notice that little segue there in which he did this thing where he's like, oh man, I would have swiped the credit card without looking at the price. And then he just like goes into like, well, that's what Nintendo would want me to do. And I'm just kind of like, well, what is it? Nintendo? Like, yeah, again, in this video, you really get this sense that he's really forcing it. You really get this sense that he's trying to like pretend to be outraged about this because nothing he really says makes any sense. Okay, like I do think that needs to be spelled out to people that nothing that Nintendeen says about Star Fox on Switch 2 really matters at all. Like it's just something that needs to get called out.
They want with every single one of their games. Actually, that's even what they want with their console, with their online subscription, with the movies that they're putting out to the public. They want that same feeling that I have seeing every one of these Nintendo 64 games getting released again to the public to overcome logic and intellect and force people to spend without any self-control. And why wouldn't they want that? Can you imagine being able to go an entire console generation and just selling the old games over again, even if you have to put effort into remaking or rebuilding or recreating or remastering the game? The fact that there's already a foundation to build off ultimately means that there's going to be major shortcuts in development, which means lower costs. And now you just get to resell that same game at full price, and you don't even need to market it that hard because that game is already marketed in each and every one of your buyers' hearts. It's the easy.
Full price? What's he talking about? This game's launching at $50 digitally and $60 physically. Like, it's a pretty affordable budget Nintendo Switch 2 game. I don't understand why he keeps throwing out like full price accusations for things at like 40, 50, 60, 70 bucks. Like they've kind of established that full price on Nintendo Switch 2 is 80. Okay, with the Mario Kart World stuff. So everything less than that is not full price. And Nintendo needs to like just accept that. Like I don't understand like who he's trying to fool with this nonsense.
Way for Nintendo to succeed, because it's a success before it even comes to the table. I mean, look, in my circles, I'm one of the most gaming savvy people there are. I'm one that actually keeps up with the media, I keep up with the news, I find out when things are going on sale, I'm the one who messages people to tell them, hey, this is the cool thing to buy, go buy this. Ever since the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, there have only been 3 instances where someone else sends a video, YouTube link, trailer, anything. They send it to me as opposed to me sending it to them, or they share it in the group chat before I share it in the group chat.
Okay, first of all, nobody cares. Nobody cares what people are saying in your group chat. You're Nintendeen. Like, okay, if you're the gaming expert in your group of friends, they must be the most ignorant group of people on the planet. Secondly, have you noticed he keeps using his group chat as like justification for this idea that like, oh yeah, a lot of other people feel the same way I do, bro. Like a lot of other people are buying handheld gaming PCs and trading their consoles and not playing their Switch 2s and buying everything Nintendo used so Nintendo doesn't see a dime. Like that's not a thing that's actually happening. Okay, like Nintendeen is like painting a picture that can't possibly be real, and we'll go into that like a little bit later because there is something that we do have to address, but I don't believe him when he says that his friend group constantly talks about how much they hate Nintendo. It's like, to me, it just seems like a giant cope.
The first time, and believe it or not, this is how I knew that Pokopia was going to be a success before it came out, was when one of my friends sent the trailer to Pokopia onto my chat with something along the lines of, hey guys, I think I have to buy this dumb console because my wife likes this game. That's his words, not mine. The funny thing is that friend and his wife had a Nintendo Switch 1 and the only game on there was Animal Crossing, and that's all his wife played through the pandemic. And then the next 2 times that it was shared.
Gotta love this gigantic cope that Nintendeen has that like people only buy and play Nintendo Switch for like Animal Crossing or for 1 or 2 other franchises. Hey, genius, they still own a Switch and they're gonna start picking up new games eventually. Do you think Animal Crossing fans are gonna have no interest in something like Tamagotchi or Pokopia? Like, no, that's just a giant cope and you really have to get over yourself.
Shared with me that something was coming out for the Nintendo Switch 2 before I shared it with the groups was when the Star Fox Direct happened, and then again when Ocarina of Time was announced. Mind you, I don't mean when it was announced at this Direct, I mean when Nate the Hate had leaked it publicly. Both Star Fox and Zelda were shared by 2 different people, and both of those people do not own a Nintendo Switch 2, have no intention of buying a Nintendo Switch 2, not because they're boycotting it, but because they don't game as much anymore, or their gaming consists of when all of us meet up together once every week or 2 and play video games together. But both of those individuals, they don't follow gaming news, they don't have any of that stuff. If you look at their Twitters and their algorithms, nothing there is Nintendo related at all. But both of them found out.
So you're telling me, okay, so Nintendeen is trying to tell me that he's aware of his friend groups like Twitter analytics. Like he knows what they look at on Twitter. He knows what their feed looks like. He knows what they're following. Like that's kind of creepy and weird, bro. But it's not true. Yeah, you can just like things like this just make it seem as if this isn't real. Because who the fuck pays attention to other people's Twitter's accounts that closely? Like, who cares how much Nintendo they see on their feeds? Who cares who they follow? Who cares what their analytics looks like? Like, that's not something that any normal person would ever care about. But because Nintendeen is trying to push a narrative, he's trying to gaslight you into thinking, no, these guys don't play Nintendo at all. They don't care about Nintendo. They don't own any Nintendo consoles. They don't play games. But they still shared it because, they're nostalgic for Ocarina and Star Fox. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just him trying to push a narrative.
Heard about Star Fox, heard about the trailer, or Zelda, obviously, and they shared it to our group chats. And even if they do not own the console, they were excited to see a game from their youth being re-released and getting attention again to the public. Because just like me, they were Nintendo 64 kids. And there are millions of people just like them out there. So while those two may have not bought a Nintendo Switch 2, many others have. And many others will because of these games. And believe it or not, many of them will only buy these games. I had a coworker, for example, that only bought Breath of the Wild for the Nintendo Switch 1. He was in his mid to late 40s, he grew up playing all the Zelda titles, and he ended up buying Breath of the Wild and the Switch 1 for one reason only, because I brought my Switch 1 with NSO and Breath of the Wild to work, and he saw that he could play this open world Zelda game and he could play Super Mario Bros. 3. And I guarantee you he's probably spent more time playing games on the Nintendo Switch Online app than he has playing Breath of the Wild.
That says more about your boomer coworker than it does about the console itself. Like, what is with this mindset, okay? Because you keep seeing people say this a lot, is that like, oh yeah, people are only playing old games, they don't play anything new, that means Nintendo's failing, it means they're old, it means they're busted. Like, it's almost like people are interested in playing different things and interested in having different experiences, okay? It's almost like there are people who like old games, who still play old games, who want to experience old games, but have no interest in new ones. That doesn't mean that, like, the new console is irrelevant and that people aren't picking up new games. If anything, it just means that, like, Nintendo games have stood the test of time and are still relevant 40 years later.
Nostalgia baiting has been the key to Nintendo's success for over a decade now. And the thing about nostalgia is that you just kind of have to keep recycling it, or moving along with the trends. Think about how old everybody was by the time we got to Virtual Console on the Wii, the NES and the SNES games. People in their 20s, they're professionals, they have credit cards, they're able to buy those games and experience them. It wasn't kids picking them up for the first time, some of them were, but most of them were just people that had nostalgia for it.
That is 100% not true. There are a ton of Super Nintendo, N64, and NES games I played for the first time on Wii Virtual Console. This isn't some oddball thing that only I did. It was kind of a normal thing. Okay, like, I don't understand this mindset that, like, oh, kids aren't playing old games. Like, bro, yes, they are, actually.
3DS started to see GameCube games. On the 3DS, the Wii U, and the Switch, the amount of games that kept coming forward that were remakes or remasters or ports or Nintendo Switch Online or anything were being released at the perfect time to appeal to those gamers that would be about 20 years older than how old they were the first time those games came out. That's the thing with nostalgia. If you time it perfectly, it's gonna hit just right and it's gonna do crazy numbers. Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, they get ported from the Wii late last year, about 20 years after their release date. We already know that the average person buying this thing is in their mid to late 30s, so obviously that's going to appeal to a chunk of the population. But the Nintendo 64 is gonna hit just a bit differently. Nintendo, after seems like years of people begging, finally added Donkey Kong 64 to Nintendo Switch Online. One of the comments that I've
Yeah, I'm sure that wasn't because of the 1-year anniversary of Bonanza coming up, and I'm sure the inevitable announcement of the Donkey Kong movie. I'm sure it wasn't because of, like, all this Donkey Kong promotion stuff they're doing. No, yeah. Oh, man. Oh, they took a while to put out DK64. Oh, Nintendo, they hate us. They're neglecting us. Ignore all these other games. I don't have DK64. Like, grow up, okay? Grow up.
seen surface the most ever since that was announced was that the levels were not as big as they remembered. And there's a very simple explanation for that. When DK64 came out, those levels, in comparison to the time, were considered massive. But now? No, not so much. Not anymore. By today's standards, those levels are considered dinky. So it's not as easy to completely one-to-one port over a Nintendo 64 game. You gotta get a little bit more creative. In the case of Star Fox 64, well, the creativity comes in the form of the visuals. That's their way of distinguishing the two games, but effectively what you're getting is basically the exact same game. Here's the funny part. When I found out the game was getting announced, I was like, oh, you know what? That's actually really cool because I love Star Fox 64. So I went and I played Star Fox 64. I played through it on my 3DS. I played through it a little bit on my Legion Go. I mean, I could have played it on pretty much every device that I have in this house, to be honest. And it was fun. It's as enjoyable now as it's always been for me. And guess what? A few days ago, I got to try out the Star Fox 64 demo. And yeah, it's Star Fox 64. The visuals are newer, the controlling is now at 60 frames per second, but at its core, it's the same game. And even if I'm happy
I love how he says he got to try out the Star Fox demo as if it's not something that's free to download for anybody who owns a Switch 2. It's like, who are you trying to fool? So, okay. So what Nintendeen wants you to believe is that he does not own a Switch 2, but he's borrowing someone else's in his friend group to play all of these games that are coming out. So he's like playing all these Nintendo games even though he won't give Nintendo a dime. That's his narrative. So what he wants us to believe is that he went on the eShop on someone else's Switch 2 and downloaded a demo. You know, I don't know about you, but like if I loaned out a console to somebody, I wouldn't want them messing around with the eShop. Okay, I wouldn't want them downloading games on it. I wouldn't want them having their credit card information on it or using my credit card or anything like that. Like, it just seems like a disaster waiting to happen. And that's kind of why I straight up don't believe Nintendeen when he tries to say that, like, he's playing all these games on, like, someone else's Switch 2, because it doesn't make any sense. Are you really telling me that during these major Nintendo Switch 2 releases that your buddy who has a Switch 2 isn't going to use it himself? Like, that's actually a good point. Like, have we ever heard Nintendeen come out and say that, like, oh yeah, I wanted to play the Switch 2 this weekend, but I couldn't because my buddy was using it or wanted it for something or whatever? Like, no, he's never said that. Again, it's a grift. Like, he can't say he went out and bought a Switch 2 because that would make his grift look bad. So instead, he has this like fake friend who will just loan out his Switch 2 whenever he wants and let him download games on it. And like, it just doesn't make any sense if you think about it for 2 seconds. Like, it makes way more sense to me that Nintendeen does own a Switch 2. He's just not admitting it for grift purposes.
That people get to experience this game now. At the end of the day, if I had a Switch 2, I still would not buy it because there's no need to buy it.
This is a cope. Like, it's not the exact same game. You have additional content. You have additional difficulty options. You have, like, you know, a new online mode primarily. Like, completely different from the original 64 version. Like, there's plenty of reasons to pick this game up, even if you already own the original 64 version. You know, I have like both the 3DS version and the 64 version, and I'm still picking this up. So like, this is just a gigantic cope. Okay. The idea that like this game doesn't have appeal because it's a remake is very clearly not true, especially when you look at like the sales numbers and how excited people are for it. Like, this is one of those remakes that have come out at just the right time.
I already have Star Fox 64, and what they're doing with the visuals and the frame rate is not enough for me to justify spending that money. Now, my game plan, if I actually had a Switch 2, would be to wait for people to go out and buy this game, and then realize that they can finish the entire thing in less than 10 hours, and then they'll post it on Facebook Marketplace where I can promptly pick it up for about $30 and just leave it on my shelf. That's what I would do if I had a Switch 2. But since
yeah, if you had a Switch 2, you fucking retard. So he's he has these weird, elaborate fantasies of what he would do to try and like boycott Nintendo, even in the hypothetical scenario in which he like owned a Switch 2. It's like, it's so ridiculous. It makes no sense. I love, by the way, how he admits he would buy physical, by the way, and not buy digital, even though digital for this release is $10 cheaper, which completely undermines his entire grift about how he's like all about like lower prices and all about how Nintendo's greedy. Like, he doesn't seem all that keen on like Star Fox's lower digital price now, does he?
I don't, I'll just pick up the game even cheaper later on. Pre-owned, obviously, because Nintendo doesn't discount. Now, the only reason that I would actually do this, though, is because I love Star Fox 64. So if I had the Switch 2, I would love to have a modernized version of the game. But that's because I have nostalgia for the title. See, once again, I'll defer back to my group chat of casual gamers. One of my friends is a major Sony fanboy. He bought the Switch 2 when it first came out, got the bundle with Mario Kart, bought Donkey Kong Bonanza, and has not purchased a game for the Switch 2 since because, in his words, he's waiting for the good Nintendo games. Well, he was very excited when Star Fox was announced because, the trailer made a very big splash. When people looked at how the game was described and what everything looked like and the visuals, he was actually excited for it. I mean, go figure, the Sony fan would enjoy a game that looks like an Unreal Engine asset flip, but I'm not trying to console war right now. So I kept telling him, I was like, listen, for your sake, I would recommend at least playing one playthrough of Star Fox 64 on Nintendo Switch Online before deciding if you want to buy this game.
Why? Why is that necessary? If he's never played the game before, your cope, that you just stated that this game is old and that nobody would want to play it just completely falls apart. Why exactly would someone who's already sold on the remake go back and play the original? It doesn't make any sense. Like you're telling people that this is the exact same game again, and it is, but somebody supposedly is coming out saying that like he wants to play it, he's excited for it, he's never played the original, knows nothing about Star Fox, and instead you try and like scare him away from it, even though you claim to be a hardcore fan of the game. Like this doesn't make any sense. It's kind of my mindset on this. Like, it's just a giant cope.
Because the reality is, it's an on-rail shooter with level design and everything from 1996, or I think it was like 97 or whatever. So when it released, it very much had standards of how the gaming community was built at the time. So he agreed that.
So what you mean to say is that it was significantly better? You fucking retard. Like, name a single game better than Star Fox 64 that's come out in the past 30 years. Like, take your time. Like, you can't come up with a single example.
That was a good idea, but he has yet to get to playing the game yet. Obviously, because the Switch 2 version hasn't come out yet, so he's waiting. But he did try out the demo. And his exact words: the Star Fox demo was not a good showing. This is taken directly from our WhatsApp group chat this past Saturday, highlighting that it felt like a bit of a tech demo, and that it took place.
A tech demo for the training mode. What kind of cope is that? That doesn't make any sense.
In a bland galaxy. And then he said, I'm sure the game is probably good outside of these stages that I tried out. But the rest of us, me and the other people in our chat who actually grew up playing Star Fox 64, we all kind of laughed because we're like, this is what Star Fox is. If you did not enjoy the demo and you think there's going to be more, there's not really more than this. So he just said that.
Yeah, huge Star Fox 64 fan, everyone. And by the way, okay, so the way the Star Fox demo is structured, okay, you start off with the training mode and then you play Meteo, which is a real stage. So like, first of all, like, you're judging the game based on the training mode. So I think, considering like the aesthetics of it and how it's structured, I think it's like I think it's reasonable to say that does look kind of boring, honestly. Like, I would have preferred not having a training mode at all in this game. Like, but like, whatever, it doesn't matter. But like, the simple fact of the matter is, Nintendeen, self-professed huge Star Fox fan, is looking at this guy playing the game for the first time and like laughing at him. Like, oh man, like, you're a casual, you don't know anything about Star Fox. Oh, like this guy's even like coming out and saying like, yeah, I'm sure the rest of the game is going to be good. And Nintendeen is making YouTube videos going like, nuh-uh, it doesn't get any better than this. It's the same all the way through, which is not true because you get a lot of mission variety in Star Fox. There's a huge skill ceiling. There's a huge replay value. It's not obvious how this game works to first-time players. I do think is something that does need to be spelled out a lot. So like, it's actually pretty common for people to be confused by Star Fox 64 structure when they first start playing. I've had that experience before where people are confused by the mission structure and they're just like, wait, you mean I can't turn it off and come back later? Like, no, like it's overwhelming to like, first-time players. But again, there's a reason this game is such a classic, because it is so good. But Nintendeen doesn't seem to have that experience. He doesn't seem to know what people playing Star Fox for the first time tend to think, and it's just kind of like, laughing at him and trying to say that like, oh yeah, this game, it's I'm a huge fan, but it's not that good, bro. It just doesn't make any sense.
He really wanted to try out that lively looking stage from the trailers. He's talking about Corneria. I'm like, yep, that's a good idea because you're going to be playing Corneria every single time you start playing Star Fox, right? It's the first stage in every playthrough you're going to be doing, which kind of confused him. And then we just had to break it down to him. We're like, yo, there's all these different paths you take. You always start from the same spot. You end in the same spot. And it's about the route you take to get there, which he thinks is really dumb. But we're like, this is kind of what we've been telling you when we said that Star Fox 64 is a game from 1996 that's coming out in 2026.
Yeah, way to sell someone on the game, Nintendeen. You sure are the gaming expert of your group. You can't even get someone into Star Fox 64. That's how much of a pleb you are. Like, you are pathetic. This is like supposedly one of your favorite games on one of your all-time favorite consoles, and here you are talking down to it in your friend group and talking about it on a Nintendo video in a desperate bid to downplay Nintendo Switch 2. Like, this... Your gamer card has been revoked.
It's not designed for the modern gamer. It's designed for those that have nostalgia for the games for when they were kids. Basically the average Nintendo buyer these days. It's a Nintendo 64 game with a new coat of paint. And again, as a Nintendo 64 fan with a ton of nostalgia for the console, for me that sounds like a dream. But it also sounds like a gross waste of my time and money. Because I obviously have nostalgia and memories of these games, and I'm still playing these games every few years regularly anyway, so why would I feel the need to go out and spend money to play the same game just so it looks a little bit different, even though I think, obviously, that the classics had a charm to them.
This isn't just a simple remaster, though. They're restructuring enemy placements. There are things that are a little bit different. There are more story elements. Lines of dialogue have changed. They've greatly expanded the story and the setting and the characterization. Right? As a hardcore fan, there's a lot of things to appreciate about what they did with this remake. Like, again, it's not a simple overhaul like the 3DS one. Like, it's a true, like, complete rebuilding of the game. And I feel as if Nintendeen not understanding that is a bit of a problem. Like, I feel like he doesn't understand what Nintendo's trying to do with this release.
I mean, look, Mario 64, one of my favorite games of all time. When it was ported over to PC and many people started to release all of these different control and visual upgrades to the title, I never played those. And they were free, and I didn't want to play them. I tried out for 5 minutes, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, but I just want base Mario 64. And with Star Fox for the Nintendo Switch 2, I feel the exact same way. I got Star Fox 64. I'll just play it the way that I love it. And now with the upcoming Zelda Ocarina of Time, it's looking like it's going to be the same situation. It's still kind of up in the air, but based off of just different reports that are coming around the industry, it seems like Ocarina of Time is going to be the same game again. At least that's what the assumptions are right now. Which means it's going to be a similar type of situation. Hyrule Field and the temples and the story and everything about that title that felt revolutionary 20 years ago will not have that same type of impact today as it did back then.
Oh no, the Ocarina of Time remake is going to be the exact same thing. What am I, a Zelda fan, going to do? Probably play a newer Zelda game. Like, what is even this cope? Because I've seen a lot of people try and say this is that like, oh man, Zelda remaking Ocarina of Time means they're out of ideas, as if they haven't just put out Echoes of Wisdom, which is one of the most unique Zelda games ever produced, and Tears of the Kingdom, which is an amazing sequel to Breath of the Wild. They got like Age of Imprisonment, if you're into the lore of Tears of the Kingdom. Like, they've been doing new stuff with the brand recently. In fact, I was actually saying that, like, yeah, we're due for a remake. We haven't gotten one since 2019 with Link's Awakening, 2021 if you count Skyward Sword HD. So, like, again, I felt it was about time for Ocarina to get remade. Considering the last Zelda game to get remade was Link's Awakening. Like, it did make a lot of sense. So this idea that like this game doesn't have an audience, and if it did, like, it's primarily going to be like older people that are just not going to be as impressed with it because it's like such an old game. I feel like historically we've kind of seen how that pans out. Okay, like we have seen these re-releases do well since like the 90s. Okay. Super Mario Bros. Deluxe was a huge hit. Like the Super Mario Advance series was like a huge deal in Game Boy Advance. Like, the Game Boy Advance, like a lot of its like highest selling games were ports of old Super Nintendo games, right? Like, again, this is like the same kind of situation. Like, this game is 30 years old. Like, it's time for a remake so that younger audiences can play it, be more familiar with like classic 3D Zelda gameplay. And like, I feel like now is a really good time for it because Breath of the Wild came out 9 years ago. So now's a really good time, I think, to reintroduce people who grew up with Breath of the Wild and may not have played Ocarina or, old Ocarina. Like, it makes a lot of sense, essentially. And the same could be said for Star Fox. Like, the argument that Nintendo only relies on remakes, remasters, and ports completely falls apart when you take into consideration just how much new stuff is coming out all the time. Pokepia was brand new. Tamagotchi Life was brand new. Yoshi and the Mysterious Book was brand new. DK Bonanza was brand new. Mario Kart World. Like, there are remakes and ports that are coming out, but there's plenty of new stuff to look forward to as well.
To seem vast and huge, but that was in a world prior to every single Zelda game that came after it. And it's going to have that same issue that the people that are playing Donkey Kong 64 are experiencing now, where they're like, oh, like, back in the day, this felt like it was massive, but now that I'm playing through it, these stages do not feel large at all. Because the reality is these games are a product of their time. Even if they are brushed up and they're brought to the modern forefront, if they're just released as one-to-one titles, you're just paying more for a coat of paint. And that could be good enough for you, right? Like, if somebody told me to play Star Fox on the Switch too, it's not like I'd be like, oh, this game sucks. No, I'd just be like, Star Fox, it looks better, right? It's the same way if I was to play Ocarina of Time. And it would be the same way if Mario 64 got an official re-release. But in all three of those cases, I would also be like, I don't know why I would spend so much money on these. I have the classics, and I love the classics. So for the modern gamer, these games are going to feel outdated. For the old gamer, they're going to feel redundant. And the only person that's going to be enjoying buying these games is that nostalgia gamer. Now, I'd argue pretty much every gamer has nostalgia, but there's a different type of nostalgia for those gamers that thrive and feed off of their own nostalgia. That kick that they get just hits differently, where you can write down whatever price you want on a piece of paper and they will pay it as long as they get to feel just a little bit of what they felt like when they were 6 years old. Those guys are going to love the Nintendo Switch 2 era. I mean, they're the same ones that went out and bought Mario Galaxy 1 again, even though they had it with 3D All-Stars. They're the same ones that bought both Fire Red and Leaf Green and even purchased some of the extra ones with the different languages, just in case it means that Nintendo will see how successful it is and now they'll release Gold and Silver. They're the same ones that would gladly spend $60, $70 to $80 on games like Super Mario RPG being re-released again in the exact same form, and they will do it for every single title that comes out, even if they didn't really enjoy it that much when they were younger, but because it reminds them of a better time. The Nintendo Switch 2 is the perfect nostalgia console. But, and this is very important, only if you got a lot of money to waste. Because while these games are getting similar treatments to what we saw being done to Spyro and Crash, they're not being priced the same way those ones are. But of course they are not, because they're not Nintendo games. And Nintendo has the luxury of being just like Disney, where it doesn't matter what you're selling or how much you're pricing it for. If it has that IP on it, if it's able to even somewhat tickle that nostalgia feeling you have, millions of people worldwide are going to come running through the door to make sure that they can get a kick of that. And the more successful all of these things are, the less Nintendo feels obligated to create something new, and the more people can be disappointed with Nintendo because they just keep re-releasing and remastering and remaking the same stuff over and over again. And that will be the best path to success for the Nostalgia Switch 2.
The whole argument that Nintendo only produces remakes, remasters, and ports completely falls apart when you take into consideration just how many new games we have been getting this year. And I know I've touched on that already, but Nintendeen just fails to, in that, like, if we're getting new games, the idea that like these kinds of remakes or remasters are holding Nintendo back just completely falls apart, because Star Fox is like an outsourced remake. Okay, it's not being made by Nintendo internally. It's like from some other studio that I've never heard of before. Don't know anything about them, but like, yeah, like it's a project that some other team did. They put this together, they produced it, and Nintendo's like internally working on something else. Okay, there's no reason to think that like there's this is taking away resources from new projects, or it's like holding something else back, because I think this thing existing proves that Nintendo is very, very interested in returning to the Star Fox formula and putting out new Star Fox products. After the success of the Super Mario Galaxy movie and Fox McCloud's role in it, like, I think that's very self-evident. So obviously, this remake is very exciting for that reason, and that it is going to usher in a new golden age for Star Fox, hopefully. We'll have to see how it pans out. Maybe the original game the studio produces isn't going to be very good and it kills the IP again. Who knows? But at this stage, I see no real reason to think that. And honestly, I'm very, very glad this game exists, because it is selling the game to a new audience. It's proving that Star Fox is still viable in 2026. And I think it proves that the franchise can get new entries going forward. And I think that's kind of the way we should be approaching this, in that, like, this isn't the kind of game that people would like track down and find like 30 years later. Okay. We are at the point where like Nintendo 64s are kind of hard to find now. You definitely have a lot of them floating around, but at the same time, I think it's safe to say that like most kids aren't going to have access to Star Fox 64. Okay. So remaking the game on a modern console, billing it as like a huge deal, a huge return to form, like this is going to be a big deal. And it's not the only game that's coming out this summer. Like July is like loaded with releases. I'm getting Grand Blue, I'm getting Rhythm Heaven, I'm getting all sorts of stuff. Splatoon Raiders. There's all sorts of games coming out in July. So like I am just very, very, very confused about how Nintendeen is seriously trying to make this argument that this remake is somehow holding Switch 2 back. Because when you break it down, really, like this is just one other major release. Like it's true that Ocarina is getting remade as well, but if you think about it, we also saw Star Fox 64 3D and Ocarina of Time 3D be released around the same time. Okay, these games are like inexplicably linked. Okay, you even have an R-Wing in Ocarina of Time. Okay, that's how closely connected they are. Okay, like Star Fox 64 and Ocarina of Time have had this really long shared history with each other, and like I feel like remaking them around the same time makes a lot of sense. And I don't really see any reason to like ring alarm bells over this idea that like two major N64 games getting remade around the same time. Like that just doesn't make any sense to me. And I do think people should call that out. I do feel as if this is something that we really do need to address, and something we do need to point out is that, like, what exactly are we so concerned about when it comes to these remakes? Because it's not going to be the bulk of Nintendo's new releases. It's not going to be a new trend for them. Like, they're just remaking an old game. Okay, this isn't like The Last of Us Part 2 HD on like PS5. Okay, the second time they've re-released a piece of shit that was technically already backwards compatible anyway. Like, this is like an actual good video game that's being like completely overhauled and looks great. So again, there is no reason to be upset. I'm Harman Smith. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Support my Patreon, buy my books, and I will see you all next time. Thank you.